I always find it frustrating, especially when I'm putting a record out and I start to sort of get feedback from it. I always just suddenly feel like my life is becoming so kind of sort of compartmentalized, and I become that person who does that. If I wasn't promoting, I'd be in the studio doing something totally different again. Well, that's a very, very, very broad question. Maybe bands like Daft Punk are probably similar in their approach. And then maybe a band like AC/DC, you would say, was quite dissimilar. It's a studio-based, not strictly a band in that sense, because it's made essentially by myself and whoever I'm collaborating with. And it's all keyboards, so there's no musicians involved. It sounds different every time, you know, and I suppose every time we put a record out, it doesn't sound like the last record. What's different about it in the method of working? Well, I suppose in the sense that I don't necessarily set myself any particular limits about where something can go, you know, and the process is so kind of sort of delivered by whoever you're working with. I mean, someone like Benjamin Clementine, it's a very different process to, say, someone like Jamie Principle. I mean, they're so disparate. You know, if it was a band, it's essentially the same 4 or 5 members working through an idea. With Gorillaz, it's so kind of amorphous and fluid. It's hard to define it, really. And, I mean, people really like to define it and say, oh, this is what it sounds like now, but you know, it doesn't really, I don't really see it like that, you know. If I said there was some real process, I'd be lying, because it really isn't like that, you know. It's very random, because that's the nature of creativity, you know. And I mean, I'm just really relaxed when I'm in the studio, and I like variety. I like seeing if it's possible to do anything with someone who you kind of don't really know very well, and you build up that relationship through the process of making music. What I'm trying to say is the process of making music is just something that continues throughout my life. These opinions get formed that this is it. It's not it. This is just part of making music. It's an ongoing thing. For me, making music is just something that I like to do as much as possible, and in many different ways.
It's coming up, it's there.
I like working with people. I mean, I was living with Jamie at the time, and we just really enjoyed each other's company. He was a cartoonist and I was a musician, and I wanted to play with electronic instruments because I sort of hadn't done much of that in my early years, because I'd been in a band as a singer.
Got my head shaved by a jumbo jet.
And it was like, how can we translate that into something which we can live and play with and work with? And that's how it happened. Yet again, I think too much has been made of that. What I said was that I wanted to make a record that felt like it was a party, and I think when we play it live, I think it definitely translates that way. But it has to have a context. I kind of imagine New York as sort of in the near future, where something like Trump winning the election would really disorientate people momentarily, and they'd find it difficult to understand what was happening. And that was the idea. The record's not about Trump at all. If it was about Trump, I would have given it a different title. But you know, this is the world we live in now. If you say one thing, it then becomes fact. So you have to be really careful that you say the right thing, and I never say the right thing. The first time I do an interview, I don't even know what it is I'm talking about, and I just say shit. And then that becomes what I have to live with, which is, you know, fair enough. But it's really, really difficult to say anything clearly these days, because the world's insane. And so someone like Trump, although it's not about him, the record inside contains anxiety that is related to that. That happened. I imagined it happening, it happened. That's unfortunate for me and for everybody else. Thankfully, I can't imagine the pen getting in, so maybe we're all right there.